But why are we here today? Well, today we're here to talk about, I got a little excited there. We're here to talk about securing the IT ecosystem. And we talked a bit about this already today. And we know that, historically speaking, our environment is very, very complicated. I literally found this from a company's presentation describing their ecosystem. I have no idea how anyone put that together. I don't know how it even means anything. But this was in it, and ironically, of course, the main point of the presentation was we need to simplify and consolidate. So this is what we're used to dealing. But a couple of years ago, we all start talking about efficiency and transformation and simplification, right? So now, already complicated ecosystems, well, they start getting a little cloudy. And you know, one of the benefits of how things used to be was even in that chaotic environment, you at least owned everything. You owned the data center, you owned your servers, you owned the folks that were writing your applications and your systems, and most importantly, you were the ones controlling the security, strategy, technologies, what have you, that kept it all together. Well, now in today's world, you're not having to trust third-party vendors to do this for you. On top of that, now everyone wants to bring their own iPhones, iPads, laptops, and they don't want to use yours, I want to use mine, and I want to access your information. Well, that doesn't really make me feel good. What this means ultimately is that now you're managing even more vendor relationships. It's very complicated, very time and resource intensive. And at the end of the day, your information and networks and systems are now accessible to, I mean, can anyone tell me how many people have access to your information? And nobody can. And that is really the scary part here. So a very complicated situation is now even more complex. And I was trying to find a good way to summarize it. And I think the best way to say it is that Michaela would not be impressed, and your commander-in-chief, Obama, would not be impressed either. So we're in a situation here where, you know, no one's impressed. So what do we do about this? Well, obviously we know that we have to manage the risk. Well, what does that mean? And what we're here to talk about over the next couple of days is that the notion of risk management has fundamentally changed. And what worked before is not going to work today. So what we need to do, what we'll be talking about over the next few days, is changing our priorities. What do we need to make a priority today? Well, your supply chain. You need to understand who's touching your devices, who's touching your hardware, who's doing the coding on these systems that you're now buying and trusting to do all your work. You need to look at your contracts and make that a priority. We talked about this in a roundtable earlier. Because now the contracts are going to really dictate the future of your systems and of your information and of your data. And I've heard this from many folks over the past, increasingly over the past year, especially those of you who are in higher level meetings. Who's in these meetings more and more? It's a bunch of lawyers. I think that should tell you something. We need to talk about prioritizing continuous monitoring. We're now talking about securing the data, going down to the code level, right? Not just securing your architectures and your systems and your networks. Information. You have all these security logs. We'll do something with it. Make that a priority. I don't care if you call it big data, informatics, analytics, whatever, but you have in there the answer of what happens before every single incident. So you can now look for the precursor of every incident, not the incident itself. It's all there. You just need to make a priority to find it. And ultimately, we've heard many times already, and I know it'll come up again and again, it's the people. So we have new priorities for our new environment, but that begs the question, well then, what do we need to do to make sure that we as an organization, right, as a community, are focused on those priorities? Well, I think that comes down to culture. But what does that culture look like? And I want to echo Ron's sentiments, obviously. I don't want to oversimplify the problems, or the solutions, rather. But I think the culture that would support these types of changes would really have two key elements. The first being that a culture is based on trust with your vendors and your supply chains and your team and your collaborators and your partners. But I think more importantly, it's a culture that embraces change. And we've been doing the same things for decades, and we have to now change them. And obviously, that's going to be hard. It's going to take time. And we all know that's a problem. And many of you are probably saying, well, that's, I'm out of luck because my culture and my organization is not cool with change. And that's okay, because I think the problem is that we always talk about change exclusively from an organizational perspective. And I want to tonight talk about, why don't we look at change from a different way to make it a little more attainable? And why don't we look at changing ourselves, changing us as an individual? And I try to think of a good way to put this, because I really believe that each of one of us can have a huge impact on our organizations. You don't have to be a CIO to change the culture. In fact, if you ask any CIO or in my opinion, any good CIO, they will say they cannot change the culture on their own because the culture is made up of the entire team, right? So each one of you, whether you're in charge of an entire agency or whether you're responsible for a team of one, you have a critical role to play in this process of change. And I wanted to come up with a sexy way to say it, and all I could think about was, one bad apple spoils a bunch, which is obviously the opposite of what I want to say. So I have a bit of some kind of an analogy here. Bear with me. I think you'll like it. Oh, I missed that one. So think about food coloring, not booze. Get your minds out of there. Think about food coloring, right? One drop of food coloring. You put a drop of food coloring in a glass of water. You change a glass of water red. Put a couple drops of food coloring in a bowl. Well, all of a sudden, your bowls change color. And in my wonderful city of Chicago, we put enough food coloring in the water where we turn the whole river green for the most awesome holiday out there, St. Patrick's Day. And I'm not even Irish, so imagine that. But if you look at it, each and every one of you is that drop of food coloring, right? And the cup may be the person sitting next to you, or the person on that team, the project you're working with. The bowl may be your office, maybe your department. The river may be your agency, maybe the whole government. Be as optimistic as you want. But I really want to emphasize that it really does take a bunch of individuals to make great change happen. And so while we're going through the next couple of days and talking about all the things we need to do and what our new priorities should be, and as your voice tells you, man, that is not what my organization looks like. Obviously, I can't do this. I want to just encourage you and challenge you to go back to this and think small and say, okay, I can't change my organization, but what can I do to change myself? And what impact can I have on my sphere of influence? Because if you look over the history of time, big change did not happen overnight. Look at civil rights. Look at women's suffrage, right? Look at women's rights. Do you think one day, back in the day, there was a caveman who said, you know what? I think it's probably not a good idea to beat my girlfriend over the head with a stick every time I want to, have some fun. Maybe I'll give her flowers instead. And that's probably how women's rights started. And it's funny, but, things happen with one person. And now, hundreds of thousands of years later, look where we are. So I really want to, emphasize this, and I'm hope you can keep this in mind as you're going through your days with us here. I'm looking forward to meeting each and every one of you over the next couple days. And thank you for your time, and enjoy your evening.